Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Fish in the Pot and the one-page dungeon collection. Droves of gamers backed the Fish in the Pot one-page dungeon collection on Kickstarter, raising over 2,000% of the original funding goal. The collection is now publicly available, and for a limited time, you can pick it up for 25% off the cover price at fishinthepot.itch.io. The Fish in the Pot one-page dungeon collection features 15 short dungeons that are quick to read, simple to prep, and fun to play. I have them, and they are amazing. Really easy. Oh no, the players zigged when you thought they were going to zag. Throw this down. The dungeons are full of character and fully compatible with the 5th edition of the world's most popular fantasy role-playing game. Pick up your copy today at fishinthepot.itch.io. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I've got Kimi from Happy Jack's RPG, and we are talking all about what it takes to run an incredible podcast / streaming network like Happy Jack's. And we are also talking about her amazing game, Dekuma, which is currently on Kickstarter, blowing through stretch goals, already funded. It is amazing. So here's my conversation with Kimi. Okay, everybody, now I am here with an amazing person, a giant in the world of tabletop role-playing games. Kimi, welcome to Tabletop Babble. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hi there. I don't know about being a giant. I'm very excited to be here. I do a lot of different things, actually. For the last 10 years, I've been involved with the Happy Jack's RPG podcast and now streams. So I run that network. Basically, I'm the manager behind the scenes who keeps everything flowing and going. So we do a bunch of APs in tons of different systems, and then we have an advice show. And I've been doing, con appearances, running games at conventions for a very long time. And then recently, in the last year or two, I've started jumping into designing games and making my own games, which is exciting. And something I never thought I'd do, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, the design bug, if you stay in podcasting and things long enough, it seems like the design bug eventually gets you.
Absolutely.
So why don't you take me back? When did you first lay hands on a tabletop role-playing game? What were you playing? What was the experience like?
Oh, man. I mean, the very first time was like junior high. It was some version of D&D, but we're junior high kids. We didn't even read the rules enough for me to remember what edition it was. And then when 4E came out, me and a bunch of friends were working at the Renaissance Fair, and we were talking about it, and we were like, oh man, yeah, D&D. I used to play that. That was fun. So we got a game together, and we're like, okay. And that's actually when the Happy Jack's RPG podcast started. A bunch of Renaissance Fair musicians who were bored between our shows talking about it. And we're like, hey, we have a recording studio. Let's talk about this and record it. I'm sure the world would love that. Evidently, some people did. So, so that was about 10 years, a little over 10 years ago now. So, and we've been podcasting ever since. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we added in streaming so you can watch our faces while we, make fools of ourselves. And so it's very exciting. And I guess, dabbling, I was really involved in a lot of online role play, between junior high and getting into 4E again. So there was Ultima Online and MMOs in that genre. And I was the MMO geek who learned Elvish and conversed with others in Elvish and things like that. So there's been a lot of role playing, even if it wasn't always at the tabletop.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're busting out the Renaissance Fair. That's some true nerd cred and some true role playing that goes on, in the Renaissance Fair, real acting and things like that. So you started 10 years ago, right? So I started podcasting and stuff about 5 years ago, and it seemed like then there were not nearly as many podcasts and things, shows as there are now. Critical Role wasn't a thing yet. The Adventure Zone was not a thing yet. What was it like even further back than that, 10 years ago, to be getting started? What did the landscape look like? I'm so interested to know, because I feel like I started my show because I was like, there's not enough out there, you know?
Right. Oh man, back in the dark ages. Yeah, I mean, there was a very small handful of us. It was us, and there's like Kicked in the Dice Bags and Fear the Boot, and I think RPPR was still back then. I can't remember. They were very early on back then too. And it was a really small community. So we all like guested on each other's shows all the time to try and help build audience. So all of us knew each other. I mean, it's still fighting to be more diverse, but back then I was like one of the only women involved at all. So it was like very, very interesting to be a kind of a woman in that space. And it's funny, we had Matt Mercer on our show years ago, like way before Critical Role. And back then he was like my friend Tappy's GM for Shadowrun or something. I think it was Shadowrun. So it was like, he was like, I mean, we knew him because we live in LA and he was a voice actor and he knew about tabletop games. So yeah, come on our show. And it was so funny, like, because like off camera, he was like, I keep trying to like figure out how to do like a D&D show. Like even back then it was like a seed in his mind. So just seeing how the entire community has grown since then. And especially like you say in the last few years has just like exploded with, I think streaming has been a big part of that, like getting to see people's faces and making it almost like a television experience for them. And then like Critical Role and things like that, getting the idea of it to the masses and getting people to tune in. It's funny because even though there's so many more choices now, the audience is growing exponentially as well. So we're not seeing like a big reduction in numbers from like, I mean, our numbers have grown obviously very substantially from 10 years ago and like the 5 people who used to listen to us. So it's interesting to see not just the pool of choices grow, but also that audience and the people who are looking for this and also coming into tabletop to play themselves. And I think that there's also a shift because we've branched out into actual plays since the beginning. We started out just as an advice show. And so like every Friday we get emails from all over the world and we, answer and give them advice and they think we know something. It's amazing. But seeing how people are coming into the hobby, not necessarily to game themselves. Like there's this whole interesting section of the population that's there to watch or listen to APs that really don't have a lot of interest in playing tabletop RPGs themselves, which is not something I ever would anticipate. But I don't know. It's kind of a fascinating thing.
Yeah. I mean, when I got started, I was talking to some friends who started this with me, and we said, what do we think? Because there were some shows out there that were playing D&D and there were some shows out there that were giving advice, and we said, why would anyone ever want to watch or listen to anybody play a game of Dungeons and Dragons or another role-playing game? Like, we should do an advice show. That is what it's all about, right? And wow, if I like actual plays seem to blow advice shows out of the water. And when you step back and think about it, right, it does make sense. More people are watching Game of Thrones than they're watching the news. So it does make total sense. It's really fun. And it's great to see. Happy Jacks is huge. The crew that you have assembled is many people. Do you know offhand, like how many quote unquote regulars you have?
Yeah, because I'm the one in charge of all the spreadsheets to make sure they're all in different games at different times. So we have about 25 who are rotating between games regularly. We have around 40 that show up in different things if people are busy. So we have a Slack channel where we organize all that. We've got spreadsheets and stuff. And diversity is really important to us. So we try and make sure that every game is balanced. Sometimes that varies a bit depending on people's availability, because a lot of them stream with other channels or are working actors or like me, just have boring day jobs. So sometimes they're not able to do it. But yeah, there's a ton of people. Our advice show has a little bit less. There's generally about like 12 people who rotate through on the advice show. But there's a ton of people who do the APs.
Yes. So let me ask you a question then. Why is it not Happy Kimi's RPG? What's who's this Jack character? And if you're doing all the work, why are they taking all the credit?
Right. Well, we get asked that question a lot. Happy Jack's Undrinkable Ale is a song we used to sing at the Renaissance Fair. So we don't actually have a Jack in the crew at all. Even with 40 people, there's not a Jack. Um, so we were like, yeah, we used to drink beer and talk about gaming. So we'll name it after this song that we wrote and used to sing. So that's where that got started. And if we could go back and talk to ourselves 10 years ago, we might pick something that was a little catchier for marketing in the future. But at the time we're like, hey, it'll be fine. We were probably a little drunk. So
and now it's your brand, right?
it's
Like this
totally
is,
brand.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great. You do a lot of amazing things with Happy Jacks, but you have also mentioned that you got into game design. You have launched a Kickstarter that has already funded at the time of recording this podcast. So congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, it took 19 whole hours. I was very surprised.
That is huge and well-deserved. You were kind enough to send me a preview version of your game, which I have. Why don't you tell people about Dekuma? What is this game? How do people play it? What is it good for? What kind of stories are we telling? Give me the pitch.
All right. So Dekuma is sort of the game before the game, or we like to call it the R&D for your RPG. Basically what it is, you play this game, and in a 40 to 90 minute session, you get character connections, a location with a bunch of details about it, and you get world dynamics all built for a campaign that you can then do in any system. And we've done like tests of everything. Like we've done like fantasy D&D, we've done Shadowrun, we've done like Monster Hearts Wild West, we've done everything you can think of. There's been a Decima session about it, I think, at this point. Because we've been beta testing for over a year now. So we've got a lot of tweaks and changes that have made it very functional and very, calling it very generic is like, doesn't sound great, but very generic in a way that you can literally pair it with any system and setting, whatever you want to do. And it will create really cool depth for what you're making.
Wow, that's awesome. I always love being able to gamify the beginning of a role playing game because I think there's so much great advice out there about what to talk about and how to collaboratively build a world and other session zero things that you should be talking about, but turning it into something fun, right? So it's not just a sort of writer's room discussion with people writing on a whiteboard, I think is a really good and valid thing.
Yeah. I'm a fourth grade teacher, so I'm a big fan of like prompts and questions. So you've got a 78 card deck that has 2 questions on each card. And it just kind of gives this, there's always that thing that you didn't think of. And we all fall into ruts with characters. Like we all catch ourselves doing the same sort of things or thinking of the same types of details for each character. So the chance of you getting a card that asks you something that just adds a little bit of depth that you maybe hadn't considered either about the world or about your character is like very high. So that really like tends to like spark a lot of creativity and going down new paths.
Yeah, I was going through the deck and looking at the questions on the cards, which, by the way, the cards are beautiful. I know you have told me that I don't actually have like the final art for the cards,
Right.
but even in this stage, they look incredible and amazing.
Thank you.
But I was looking at and I was like, oh, there are other things you could do with these. Or like, you could use these to open a session, right? Say like, hey, there's answer this question about your character, right? Maybe it's you because you've never considered it. It's now a chance to get a richer backstory for your character or create connections to the world that we haven't seen before. And I thought that was. It seems like a very versatile thing that could be used in a lot of different ways. Have you used it in ways other than at the beginning of a role playing game session?
Yeah, at first I didn't, but once we started beta testing, I started getting feedback from people, and people started using them. If you do the PBTA systems at all, like a lot of times they have what are called love letters, which people do, like, if you've missed a month or two because life or whatever, and then you're trying to get back in the vibe of the game. There's a lot of people who said, yeah, hey, I did a couple cards instead of doing love letters. And it just zapped us right back into kind of like who our characters were and what their connections to each other were. I've had GMs play just on their own to like come up with story ideas and connections. And then I had a writer who like, he's like, I don't play tabletop RPGs, but I saw this and I've sort of had some writer's block. So I played this, and it really helped with like me finishing. I don't know what they're writing, a novel or whatever, a screenplay. Probably it's LA. So that was also like kind of like, oh, that's amazing. So lots of other uses. It also the deck is it's a traditional tarot deck of cards, and it's split into 3 different sections. So you can, depending on what you want to create, customize that. So if you're a GM and you're looking to just build a location, you just grab the blue star cards and you can, just do the location questions with it. Same thing, like if if you're running an adventure in D&D and it's in Waterdeep or whatever, then you just leave those, you already have your location. You probably have a map of it, you probably have all those things. Leave the location cards out, and then you just have the connections and the world dynamics and stuff like that. So it's very malleable, like what you're saying.
Yes, that's really great, and I love all of the different things that you are able to do a versatile thing like this. Where did the idea come from, and how did you start to develop this?
Well, I GM a lot, and I GM a lot at conventions, and I was finding myself really in love with like PBTA's character connections that they have at the beginning when you're doing character creation for a lot of those games. They have little questions on there. And like Masks is a great example. Demigods PBTA has a fantastic set of questions. And I was just, when I started playing those PBTA games, I was like, this helps so much. Like your first session, you jump in and you already know how you feel about these other characters. You've got a little bit of history with them, and we just found ourselves like kind of skipping those awkward session 1 or 2 where you're like, I am a dwarf and I don't trust that elf because they're an elf, or whatever it is. You're really just able to jump in and just go with it. So my friends and I found ourselves, when we were running systems that didn't have that, I run a lot of one roll engine systems, wild talents, things like that. I was finding myself like nicking the questions from different PBATA systems and stuff like that to kind of like, well, you use this even though it's for another system, and then we'll launch it. So it was sort of something a lot of friends of mine were doing too, kind of like ad hoc bits and pieces from different things we liked. We were pulling, there's a game called The Quiet Year, which is a fantastic story game. And I was finding myself pulling bits of that to like create a location. And I was pulling stuff from PBTA. And, so I was like, I had this little toolkit of like all these different things from different games. And I finally was like, maybe we should just make a thing that's meant to do this. Because a lot of people use things like Microscope and things like that and kind of like shoehorn it into the role of creating the world. But there's very few tools that are like just meant and designed to start you on that path for you to then finish it in a campaign.
Right. Yeah. I see that a lot, right? You'll sit down to play, I don't know, Pathfinder, and somebody's like, but we're going to use fate rules to connect our characters, right? Or we're going to take this piece, and all of that is really great, but it is very cool to have a one size fits all kind of system, because then your players know what they're doing, right? As soon as you say I'm pulling rules from here and smashing it into here, people get nervous. They're worried that they're going to do something wrong. But if it's like, hey, this is the exact same thing we've done the last 3 times we started a game, I think that works out great.
Yeah. And it's all in a little card box too. It's not like you have another thing to lug around, like another book or something, because I wanted it to be something I could just like keep in my dice bag almost.
Hey everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is the official digital toolset and game companion for Dungeons & Dragons. You know it, I know it. And you know that you can use D&D Beyond to build characters, track campaigns, run adventures, and do so much more. Build encounters, who knows what's next. Plus, you also know there's lots of awesome free content like the D&D basic rules and articles from great writers like James J. Hake, videos from Todd Kenrick, and so much more. Plus, you also know the site is always being updated. Now, here's what I want to know. Why haven't you checked it out yet? There's so much free available. You should go check it out right now. And hey, guess what? There almost always seems to be some kind of sale going on if you decide you want to get some paid content. So go to dndbeyond.com, tell them DSPN sent you. Let's get back to the babble. So I want to talk to you about this art. What for people who have not seen your art yet? Could you describe it and then talk to me about who's working on this?
So the art, we went back and forth on so many different like styles and designs for it. And then we really decided to simplify. A lot of tarot is very fantasy and things like that, but we wanted it to be something that could work with anything. Like if you're making a sci-fi generation ship, you don't necessarily want like King Arthur on your tarot cards, right? So we decided to go with kind of a shadow puppet silhouette style art. So it's very colorful, but the main figures generally are in silhouette or shadow puppet style where there's like slight detailing, and that way it's really easy for people to like pick a card and then like kind of picture their own character or their own setting and the world they're making in the cards themselves. My friend Samantha Terry, who's also on Happy Jacks, she's one of our rotating in. She's in a lot of the games. Is a fantastic artist, and she's been doing this for years. She's done a lot of stuff for Blizzard, DC Comics, just a ton of great things. And she was kind enough to give me a very good price on her artwork, so that she's also a big tarot enthusiast.
Oh, great.
It's something I've had to do a lot of research into because it's not something I was really versed in before I started this project. I knew the basics of it, but she knows like here's the symbolism for this card, so you can actually use the art from the deck as an actual tarot deck too, because all the symbolism is still in the art too. And she's just amazing. It's amazing. I love it. It's so exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's, I think it's evocative and it's a way to all sit down and get into the game together, whether you've been playing your game for years with your friends or you're just starting out. You've mentioned Powered by the Apocalypse a couple times. Are you a fan of PBTA games? I'm taking it, which is cool. I am too, yeah. For sure.
No, yeah, I love PBTA. Some of the hacks more than others. My favorite right now, I'm running a Masks AP right now. I'm the GM of that one. So adore Masks. Masks was my first PBTA game. And I think it spoiled me. I've played like the actual Apocalypse World, the second edition, and those and stuff too. And they're great. And then my other favorite is Demigods. I'm a little biased on that because Jason, who wrote it, is also in the Happy Jacks circle.
Yes. Yeah. We've had him on the show before when Demigods was fun kickstarting. So yes, great guy.
Yeah, but I love that one. I have been a history teacher for 6th and 7th grade at different points, and a lot of that is like ancient and medieval history. So a lot of the things that are wrapped up in Demigods are things that I really love, and like Egyptian history and Grecian and all these things. So it's just so much fun to play. I love that.
Yeah, that is great. And Masks is great. It's one of my favorite, not just Powered by the Apocalypse, but superhero games, really, because it is difficult to make superhero games that are not extremely crunchy, right? Because of all the different power combinations and Batman has to be able to stand toe to toe with Superman and all that kind of stuff, right? And Masks using Powered by the Apocalypse makes that easy and is just a lot of fun if you want to play angsty teenage superheroes, which who doesn't? Come on.
Yeah. So much fun. I also think PBTA is like a great kind of intro to tabletop role-playing games. I know D&D is kind of like the 10,000 pound gorilla in the room that like most people get into like the hobby with, but it's pretty crunchy. There's a lot to know. It's got a like kind of a high price point. So like, I think that PBTA, it's like, here's your, you pick your playbook, there's cool art on most of them. It's really easy to go through character creation. You can do it in like 45 minutes. And it's just really simple and elegant in a way that a lot of other games aren't. So I think it's like a really great first game for people.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the reasons you see D&D being people's first RPG is it's the one most people know, right? And you often need at least one other person to play an RPG. That's its biggest point. I think it really has going for it is you can sit down and play with people who know the rules, right? But I agree with you. Powered by the Apocalypse is typically simpler to grab onto and is a lot of fun. And I think gets to the core of what most people want in a role-playing game experience. I often do not care what I am playing as long as I get to, engage in collaborative storytelling with my friends, right? And so that I think is one of the big advantages of Powered by the Apocalypse. And having a middle option between pass and fail, I think is great. And having failure mean more than just you don't do the thing you do, things get worse. I think is also a great way to tell a story. So you've talked about Dekuma. As we've said, you have funded now. So what are we looking at stretch goal wise on your Kickstarter?
Well, we're very excited. We just hit our second stretch goal like an hour ago, so it's very exciting. So that was the $15,000 level. So that means we're getting the full art box for the tarot cards and more printables. We're creating part of Decima helps you create a map that you, and it's not necessarily a battle map, although if you really wanted to, you could do that. But it's more just so everyone has similar reference points. I've run games before that were more theater of the mind without having just a basic like this is where this is where that is. And about partway through, you're like, oh, all of us are picturing something completely different in this space. Let's draw some X's and circles. So I feel that part of world creation is just kind of having, even like if you draw like me, like I played this with Samantha a lot, my artist. She like draws like the perfect castle with like moss and all this stuff. And I'm just like, this is my square that's labeled stable because that's what it is. It's a stable. So my square even looks terrible. But so these sci-fi printables are what's going to unlock next. And basically it's just a sheet of different things you might put on a map that you can cut out and glue down. We have map templates too that you can that are like the outline of like a spaceship or different things like that. So if you are artistically talented like me, you can have these things and then cut them out and glue them down and have a beautiful map that you didn't actually have to draw at all. So that's kind of the thing. And also the next thing we're unlocking at 18,000 is all the face cards. So right now Samantha's doing all the major arcana and she's doing the assets for the other cards, but it'll be like, okay, she draws some swords. So like the 5 of swords will literally be like 5 swords. That's the base level. So this next level, the face cards. So the Queen of Swords will be an individual card and things like that. So just more art. And then at 20,000, if we get there, which I'm going to like pass out if we get there. It's very exciting. She's going to do like the full deck of 78 individually drawn cards, which would be fantastic and amazing. And like my crazy wildest dream.
Yes, that would be amazing, and hopefully, people who are listening can help you get there. Is this your first stint into game design? Are there other things you've dipped your toe into? Are there things in the future you're planning on dipping your toe into? I know this is your focus right now, and so anything you say, people shouldn't be like, "Where is it? Give me immediately!" Right?
Give me yeah. Well, Decima is actually my first, but it's not my first to release. So I came up with this idea, and this was the idea that kind of was like, all right, maybe I should design games because I got this idea. I started talking with people at local conventions about it, and they were like, that is a great idea. You should make that thing. So I started doing that. But many, many months ago, we got into like the beta testing phase, and I'm not good at like just sitting and waiting. So that's pretty much what the beta testing phase is. You put it out in the world and you like wait for like the carrier pigeons to bring back some feedback about your thing. So in that waiting period, I'm pretty active on Itch.io. There was a game jam. For those of you who aren't familiar, Itch.io is like a very like indie scene. It's mostly designed for video games, actually. But there's a small contingent of us out of place tabletop role players who write like very short, like 1 to 10 page, generally tabletop role playing games that you can generally pick up for nothing to like $10. And these game jams are themed, and they're like, okay, in the next 2 weeks, we're all going to write games about like folk tales. And that was the one that kind of or folklore was the one that caught my eye. I was like, oh, that's cool. Again, having been a history teacher, I was like, I know things about that. So I jumped in on this jam. And they're not really competitions. We all just kind of like put our stuff in and everybody's like, hey, you're great. So I designed one that I called Virgins and Vixens, which is loosely actually based on the dice mechanic of PBTA. but a lot of people were picking individual stories or individual folk tales that really spoke to them. And I was having trouble picking one, so I decided to do one that's a commentary on the roles of women in mythology and folklore and fairy tales. So you get to choose one of the tropes. You don't have to play as a woman, but all the tropes are based on tropes of women in these fairy tales. And if you look across the world, in all cultures, there's kind of the same tropes that appear in these folklore tales. You've got like the prize, who's like the beautiful princess who doesn't really have any part until, she might be in trouble in the tower. Oh, and then the knight gets her at the end and they get married no matter what she says. And oh, she has no lines anyway, so that's okay. And then you've got like the witch who's evil because she knows stuff and isn't pretty, and that's obviously evil. So it's just like you've got all these in between. There's just a huge variety of these. There are exceptions in every culture. They have like their one or two stories about a strong female character. And you're like, oh, okay, but they're the exception more than the rule. So for Virgins and Vixens, which I wrote in a crazy 2 weeks while Decimo is beta testing. Basically, you start off with descriptor words. You start off with 5 descriptor words. For the prize, I think it's like beautiful, charming, helpless. Like there's these basic words that describe the trope. And as you play, as you roll, you earn like empowerments. And after a while, you can cross out one of the words and you can put your own word in there. And each one of these words gives you an advantage on your mechanic. So if you're like, oh, I've done some stuff and I've earned some of these, okay, I'm no longer helpless. I am now capable. So you can kind of advance your character. And it's a very narrative game, even more than PBTA. But I don't know, it's fun. I'm really proud of it. It's exciting.
That's excellent. You should be. You should be super proud of it. That's really cool. Have you heard of Uncaged Anthology?
I have, yes.
So I bring that up right because of the connection of it was Ashley Warren, who's a great game designer, has been on this show. Talked about how she put that together because she was tired of the tropes among women monsters and female monsters in mythology and that kind of thing.
Medusa, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the two of you would get along great. You're both genius designers, so it would be really cool to have you all jam together.
Yeah. Well, we're Twitter friends right now. Maybe someday we'll be more than that.
Yes, absolutely. So you have played a lot of different role-playing games with your time in Happy Jacks, and I'm sure outside of Happy Jacks as well. Although I don't know if you have much time outside of Happy Jacks other than what you do for a living.
You'd be amazed. If I started listing my hobbies, you'd be shocked. But
so I'm wondering, for people out there who I often talk to people who are they have one game, whatever it may be, D&D or Pathfinder often, and they're like, oh, I don't have the time to learn another game. I don't have I can't find the people to play another game with me. What advice do you have for people who are interested in trying other systems but feel like they don't have the time or resources to do so?
Oh, first off, I feel you. Like, I understand. I think a lot of those people probably have at least one other book on their shelf somewhere or a PDF of something sitting on their computer. Most gamers I know, no matter how married they are to a specific system, have at least been curious enough to like purchase or like borrow something. And they might not have given it back. So just like take some time and just like look at it. And the thing I always like to kind of start with is just like creating a character. Like, even if you don't have another person to play with, like sit there, go through character creation, because that alone will generally tell you a ton about a system. And then if you're like, hey, I really love this, look online, because there are so many people on Discord, on forums all over who are also looking to play these games. And it can sometimes be a little hard. Like Facebook has groups for pretty much every role-playing game there is. Like, get out there and be like, hey, I have this book. I have no idea if anyone's interested in playing, but we have Hangouts now, we have Zoom, we have Skype, we have all these ways that you can play without having to actually, no matter where you live in podunk nowhere with no other role players. I've been there. I know how it feels. Like, you can connect with people all over the world. Maybe somebody in Australia who like works a weird shift so they can be in, they can play in the same time as you, wants to play this game too. There's just so many ways to connect, and we've advanced as a hobby so far beyond going to your friendly local gaming store and like checking the little board and pulling someone's phone number, little tab off the Xerox sheet on the board, like just try it. Because I guarantee, especially if you're brave enough to run a game, that's sort of like the Happy Jacks mission, is to increase the number of GMs in the world. If you are willing to run a game, like it's almost impossible to not get people who somewhere, if you do a little bit of digging, who want to play that game and are interested in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think this is all great advice. It is great to hear from people who understand, right? That, hey, there are things, hurdles, time, money, people, the three resources every project needs to get off the ground, right? So I think that is a huge thing. As far as people who are interested in finding out more about you and more about Decuma, where should they go and what should they do?
Well, the first thing you should do is go to goldenlassogames.com/Kickstarter, because that will redirect you right to the Kickstarter, because Kickstarter URLs are crazy pants. I was telling you about my hobbies. One of my other hobbies is I'm a cosplayer. I love comic books. I love movies, things like that. And I've loved Wonder Woman since I was a little girl. So I dress up as Wonder Woman a lot at conventions. So Golden Lasso Girl is my tag pretty much on all social media. So Golden Lasso Cosplay, and that led itself very easily into Golden Lasso Games, which is my gaming company. So a lot of comic book themed branding happening. So if you check out the Kickstarter page, it tells you pretty much everything there is to know about Decuma. We've got a really lovely video that kind of tells what it is, and there's even a how to play video. We've had a ton of actual plays of it happen with different podcasts and streams. So if you want to actually see it in action, there's a big list with links that you can go either listen if, podcasts are obviously your jam, or watch if you wanted to. So you can pretty much learn everything about Decuma on that page. If you want to learn more about me and my other projects, Finding Virgins and Vixens, I have a game that as soon as Decuma craziness is done, called Moving On. That's a story game about death that hopefully I'll finish at some point soon. You can go to goldenlassogames.com, and all my stuff is there for my games that I'm creating. And if you're interested in Happy Jacks, which is, I forgot about that. That's my other thing I do. That one's easy. That one's just happyjacks.org. And all our shows are listed there. There's a cast page. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. You can find us fairly easily there.
Right. Wow, that is incredible. I can't believe that you are also a cosplayer, which is an extremely time-consuming hobby on top of all of this other amazing stuff. Kimi, please come back, talk with me again. I'd love to hear about what else you've got going on, especially when you've got more games and things like that coming out. Thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
That was a great conversation with Kimi. People, if you would like to support Tabletop Babble financially, and I hope you do, I hope the show is worth at least $1 a month to you. That's like less than 25 cents an episode, less than a quarter an episode. Head on over to Patreon, where you can find my page, patreon.com/INTROCASO. That's patreon.com/Intricasso, where you can help support the show for as little as $1 a month. People who are already doing that, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yes, listen, there are tons and tons of rewards on the site, but the real reward is supporting this show, helping make it happen. It is super awesome. And if you're already doing that, thank you so much. If you want to support the show for free, hey, guess what? You can do that too. Create a free iTunes account, rate us, rate all the other podcasts you love. They'll appreciate it too. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts right now, guess what? You can just swipe right over, give us 5 stars. It is that simple. It'll take you 5 seconds. And if you leave us a 5-star review with words, I'll read it out loud. You can make me say anything you want, like Mando Wookie, who left a review entitled "Great Show About RPGs and Their Creators." It reads, "This show is great with a lot of info on the TTRPGs. James brings high energy into every episode and his guests answer in kind. Everyone I've listened to so far has been passionate about the industry and the community because they are part of it. They share stories and advice that are a treasure trove of knowledge worthy of a dragon." Thank you so much, Mando Wookie. I really, really appreciate that. I would love to see a Wookie in Mandalorian battle armor. That is an awesome thought. Season 2. Maybe we'll get it in Season 2. Love to see it. All right, people, you can follow me on Twitter at James Introcaso. That's at JamesIntrocaso. Also, check out my blog, worldbuilderblog.com, for all of the cool game design stuff I am doing. It is all over there. Tabletop Apple is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget, RPGs are like sex. Hey everybody, I wanted to let you know about Knuckle Dragger. Knuckle Dragger is a virtual tabletop, right? Okay, cool. You know virtual tabletops. You've seen them before, but how about a game, a TTRPG, specifically designed for the tabletop you're playing on? And that is what Knuckle Dragger is all about. The game interface gives players more control, keeping you more engaged. Automatic tracking means the small details won't get lost in the shuffle. Plus, there's a unique combat system that is lightning fast, even in atypical combat settings. I cannot wait to check this out. Players can do checks simultaneously, which leads to faster, wilder combats and more interesting, realistic group challenges. Plus, you're doing it together, which I really, really love. And the game will always have a free-to-play version, but for $5, players will get access to a new expansion every single month. Listen, Knuckle Dragger has a Kickstarter. Help make this awesome game a reality. It's Knuckle Dragger, all one word. Knuckle, like the thing on your fist. Dragger, like when you're dragging a thing. So, Knuckle Dragger. Go check it out on Kickstarter. You're going to want to fund it. Check it out. Tell them DSPN sent you.